وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. أما بعد، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Ramadan is coming to a close, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says at the end of verse 185 of Surah Al-Baqarah, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولتكملوا العدة ولتكبروا الله على ما هداكم ولعلكم تشكرون. And so that you may complete the prescribed number of days of fasting and glorify Allah, do the takbirs for the guidance He has provided you with, and so that you may express your gratitude. Takbir is veneration and glorification of Allah, and it includes gratitude as shukr, which is more general. For shukr is expressed in words like the takbir, and actions that bring us close to Allah and help us earn His pleasure. One of those actions is, of course, the Zakatul Fitr. And actions that bring us close to Allah and help us to earn His pleasure, which we perform during this blessed month. And the shukr of the heart is that it is overwhelmed by the state of thankfulness for the tawfiq, for the enabling grace that Allah has blessed us with to complete the prescribed number of days of fast and perform the acts of worship He had commanded us with. Celebrating the Eid and wearing your best clothes is also part of this takbir and shukr. Litukabbiru alludes to the fact that the celebration pertains to the realization that Allah is greater than everything that we hold dear. That Allah has commanded us to honor us, and that His obedience is the greatest honor that He bestows upon whom He chooses from among His creation. We must thus give it precedence over all our desires and temptations. For when Allah commands us with "do not," He seeks to reward us and bless us with that which is better than that which He has forbidden and deprived us of. Let us remind ourselves before Ramadan departs that Ramadan came to transform our souls and the way we live our lives, and not to be seasonal worshippers. Let us make a resolution to make piety, charity, fasting, night prayer, and the recitation of the Holy Quran a way of life. Remember that the Holy Quran is a gift to us from Allah. We have been chosen for it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ثم أورثنا الكتاب الذين اصطفينا من عبادنا فمنهم ظالم لنفسه ومنهم مقتصد ومنهم سابق بالخيرات بإذن الله ذلك هو الفضل الكبير. Then we bestowed the book upon those whom we have chosen from our servants. Some of them wrong themselves, some follow a middle course, and some are foremost in good deeds by Allah's will. That is truly the greatest bounty. It feels like only yesterday we were looking forward to Ramadan, and it arrived like a generous guest, full of virtues of morality, fasting, night worship, charity, acts of obedience. And now those golden moments are about to leave us. Our lifespan on earth is like Ramadan, which would end sooner than we estimate. And so let us make a firm resolution to make the days after this Ramadan better than the days of the last Ramadan. Imam al-Daylami narrated, rahimahullah, narrated on the authority of Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib, karramallahu wajhah, he whose 2 days are equal is a loser, and whoever the end of his 2 days is evil is deprived of mercy. And whoever is not improving is in a state of decline. And whoever is in a state of decline, meaning he's regressing, death is better for him. Whoever yearns for paradise will hasten to perform good deeds. Whoever is afraid of the fire will be distracted from that which he desires. And whoever anticipates death, pleasures will be insignificant in his presence. And whoever practices zuhd, abstinence in the world, is able to bear trials and tribulations with ease. The believer must sit down and reflect as Ramadan draws to a close as to whether he has reaped the benefits of fasting. Has Ramadan passed over the years with no change in his behavior, attitude, and outlook? He must ask himself, have I attained the goal of fasting and increased in piety, which is the goal of fasting according to Allah, la'allakum tattaqun? Has my pursuit of God's pleasure and observance of his injunctions increased? Ibn Ajiba, Qaddasallahu sirrahu al-Aziz, says in his Al-Bahr al-Madid, know that the share of every servant from Allah is based on the extent of his piety. And his piety is according to the extent of his focus in seeking Allah, sidqut tawajjuh. And the extent of his focus is according to the extent of his detachment from worldly concerns. And the extent of his detachment from worldly concerns is according to the level of his zuhd. And the level of his zuhd, asceticism, is according to the extent of his love for Allah. And the extent of his love is according to the extent of his knowledge of Allah. And his knowledge of Allah equates with the level of his certainty, al-yaqeen. The fall of a servant from divine grace is according to the extent of his lack of piety. His lack of piety is according to his lack of focus in seeking Allah. And the lack of focus in seeking Allah is according to the divergence of his concerns, his many concerns. And the extent of the divergence of his worries or concerns is according to the extent of his greed and desire for the world. And his desire and greed for the world equates with his lack of love for Allah. And the extent of the weakness of his love for Allah is according to the extent of his ignorance of Allah. And the extent of his ignorance equates with the weakness of his yaqeen, his conviction. He must ask himself, has my recitation of the Holy Quran, the night prayers, and the time I spent in the mosque brought me closer to Allah? Is Allah and the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam dearer to me now than before Ramadan? Or would I still turn a blind eye to the teachings of Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam for the sake of worldly favors or to please fellow mortals? He must ask himself, have I learned to be patient and exercise self-restraint? Have I now got the will and resolve to stand for the truth against my desires and those who oppose the truth? Has fasting taught me self-discipline? He must ask himself, has fasting inculcated in me the awareness of God and sincerity in the deeds that I perform? Would I still do things to show off and please people and earn their praise only? Would I ask myself these three important questions each time I embark upon a deed or a task? What am I doing? Why am I doing it? And how am I doing it? It has been reported that Sufyan al-Thawri, rahimahullah, used to spend the nights and days weeping. And the people used to ask him, why do you weep? Is it due to the fear of Allah? And Sufyan al-Thawri said, no. The people said, is it due to the fear of hellfire? He said, no, it is not the fear of hellfire that makes me cry. What makes me cry is that I have been worshipping Allah for many years and teaching the people, and yet I'm not certain that my intentions are purely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He must ask himself, has fasting taught me to restrain my tongue and mind my manners? Has it taught me to discharge trusts, just as I had discharged the obligation of Ramadan with truthfulness? Because fasting, as the Prophet said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is a trust. Has fasting taught me to reflect upon the plight of the less fortunate and thus made me more merciful? He must ask himself, have I benefited from all the exhortations about the virtues of being charitable in Ramadan? Has my constant repetition of the prayer for forgiveness inculcated in me the resolve to turn over a new leaf and shun sin in the future? Have I changed for the better? He must ask himself, has praying in congregation and spending time in the masjid inculcated in me a stronger sense of unity with the Muslims? Has it made me realize the meaning of the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that the believers are like one single body? Do I pray for the persecuted and less fortunate ones? Am I hurt by their plight? He must ask himself, have I benefited from the prophetic exhortation, fast and attain good health? Sumu wa tahsihhu. Would I now take better care of my health so that I may become a believer who is strong in body and mind? With Allah's exhortation, fasting is better for you, antasumu khayrul lakum, make me want to observe the optional fasts and reap their benefits, both physical and spiritual. He must ask himself, have I discharged my duties towards my dependents? Do I encourage and command them to worship and obey Allah? Do they remain asleep until the sun rises without performing the dawn prayer? Has the month of Ramadan reminded me of my responsibilities as a husband and as a parent? We know that you will return, O Ramadan, every year, but what we do not know is will we be welcoming Ramadan next year? Allahumma tasallam Ramadan minna waj'alna min al-maqbulina indaka wa min taqa'ika min an-nar waj'alhu shahidan lana la alayna wa'idhu alayna a'waman adida wa azminatan madida bi sihhatin wa khairin wa lutfin wa afiyah. May Allah accept our fasts and acts of worship in this Ramadan and in the coming years. May we be from those who receive or who would receive the glad tidings of the tranquil soul upon death. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية فادخلي في عبادي وادخلي جنتي. O tranquil soul, return to your Lord well pleased, and your Lord pleased with you, and enter into the company of my righteous servants, and enter my paradise. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
أنت الكريم وجودك المعهود، يا بر يا صمد ويا مقصود. بالباب قمت بذلتي مستشعرا منك السخاء وأنك المعبود.